Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's seminar series presentation on if anyone can find a unicorn, it's a dog, with Dr. Pete Coppolillo, who is the Executive Director of Working Dogs for Conservation. My name is Corey Chimko. I am the Volunteer Digital Content Technician for the Saola Foundation, and I'm going to be taking care of the technical aspects today. If you have any issues hearing or seeing the presentation, please let me know in the chat window, and I will do my best to get you up and running. A bit about the format today. We expect the presentation to run about 40 minutes, and we'll be meeting everyone for the duration of the talk. But if you have any questions for Pete, you can type them into the chat window, which I will be monitoring. And we'll have a 15 to 20-minute Q&A session following the presentation. Any questions we don't get to will be forwarded to Pete, and he will reach out to you via email following the talk. The presentation is being recorded, as I said, so if you want to turn off your video, please make sure you do so now. And I also recommend that you switch to speaker view for the presentation itself, which you can do by clicking the view button in the top right corner of your Zoom window and choosing speaker. And finally, we'll also be sharing the meeting recording via YouTube and saolafoundation.org in the coming days. So now I'd like to turn things over to Lorraine Scottson, the CEO of the Saola Foundation, to introduce our speaker today. Lorraine?
Thank you, Corey. I'll just check you can hear and see me okay.
Yep,
Great.
all good.
Okay, so welcome everybody. There's a lot of new faces here today, so it's really awesome so welcome to the Saola Foundation family, and I hope you'll stay with us on this journey. So I'll start, before I hand over to Pete, I'm gonna start with a brief program update, because I think a lot of people will be interested to know where we are in terms of the Saola Foundation and our mission to launch the most intensive search ever for Saola in the wild. So I'll do that first. Now, let me see if I can get my slide changed. There we go. Okay, so first up, we have new members of our team. It's a huge welcome. We've got Zai, hopefully he's in the audience today. Zai is our new Lao field coordinator. He's going to be working very closely with Rob and Oli, largely in executing a nationwide talent search in Lao for wildlife trackers and dog handlers. So Zai's going to be leading a really big recruitment drive over the coming months as we get ready to form our Saola search team. We've got Bryony. Bryony's our new grants assistant, and she is very much supporting myself and Bill in fundraising and in communications. So welcome, Bryony. And then we have Pookie, who is working with the Lao team, managing Lao administrative duties, as there's a growing administrative burden that comes with the incredible progress that we've been making. So again, welcome Pookie to the team. Very pleased to have you all. We also have joining the family is Min. So Min is a good friend of mine. She is a PhD student with the Colorado State University. She's now our research associate. So Min's research is focused on large antlered muntjac. There's a lot of synergies between Min's research and the Saola program, and it's a very mutually beneficial relationship. So we're very pleased to have this formal collaboration. Now, a lot of you will quite rightly be wondering, you know, there's been a lot of talk since we launched in September 2020. When are we actually going to start searching for Saola? So some of you will have seen this graphic before. We launched in September 2020, so this timeline covers 3.5 years of our initial operations, right? So we've broken that down into 3 phases. So phase 1 is development, launching the Saola Foundation, getting our feet on the ground, fundraising, and developing all our operations. So that's been underway now since February 2020. Phase 2, preparation. Getting the field team ready, getting all of our tools and technology, and establishing legal status in Lao, things like this, everything that we need in order to launch this intensive search program. That's phase 2. And then phase 3, that's the intensive search. That's getting out into the forest and doing everything that we can to find Saola in the wild in Lao. So we are deeply embedded. So here we are, right? We are deeply embedded in phase 2 right now. Pete's going to talk today about our really exciting developments with the detection dog team. We are, Rob, Oli, and now Zai are working to pull together the Saola tracking team, particularly the human trackers, the human element of that. We've got development of this absolutely extraordinary, rapid, field hardy DNA testing kit from our partners with WCS New York Molecular Lab. That's going to allow us to test a dung sample and know within 1 hour if it's Saola or not. So compare that to the up to 6 weeks that it takes right now. An absolute game changer, and that piece of equipment is just about ready. And we're establishing our legal status in Laos. So in terms of fundraising, these green bars sort of crudely indicate where we're at in terms of fundraising. We've got a total target of 2.7 million that we've estimated that we need to fund this entire program, including that 2-year intensive search, right? So we're a significant amount of the way there already, albeit a very long way to go. I'd say roughly estimate we've surpassed 500,000 in terms of resources available, raised through us and through our partners, available for the Saola program. We had a very significant grant from the Critical Ecosystems Partnership Fund, which has covered much of these phase 2 operations. And we've got, significant gratitude towards Pete and his team at Working Dogs for Conservation, who have also been able to generate considerable support for the detection dog team. And I'll let Pete talk a bit more on that. So our next milestone, and get that, here we are, right? We want to get into phase 3. We want to start searching for Saola. Where we're at now, we need to have, so our next milestone is to get our field team in the forest, and we want to have the financial cushion of at least 6 months to keep them out, everything it costs to have a team in the forest working, right? So we want to build that financial cushion before we put them in the forest of at least 6 months. We can't form this team and then having them sitting in the office waiting while we fundraise, right? So that target for that initial 6 months of having the team operational is an additional 175,000 that we're now looking at as our next milestone for passing. Providing that we close that gap soon, which we believe we will, we could see this intensive search for Saola beginning by the middle of this year, which is just beyond exciting to all of our team. And you know what, we're banking on it. Recruitment's underway. We're already beginning this search for talent to form this elite, this elite Saola search team, which is really going to become one of the most specialist teams the region has ever seen. And you'll learn a bit more about that from Pete's talk. So I would want to give a nod to the true superstars of the story at the moment is our funders. On the left here, we've got the founding supporters who allowed us to exist as an organisation when we launched back in September 2020. And then on the right there, we've got this growing, incredible body of funders that are supporting us as we go. And then additional to all of these here, there's also numerous individuals, many of whom are in the audience today, who are supporting our programme. And you can see those details in the previous annual report and the upcoming one. So huge gratitude, thank you. Now, with that, I'm going to unshare my screen. So Pete, please feel free to start getting set up while I introduce you. So it's I have unshared my screen, correct, Corey? Yeah, awesome. Right. So, very, very pleased today to be introducing Pete Cocolio, who's going to give us talk today. Now, a brief bio on Pete. Now, Pete worked with the Wildlife Conservation Society for 10 years, largely planning and executing conservation strategies. He spent his early career in Africa and moved back to the United States as his kids got older, so he tells me. He ran the WCS Yellowstone program for some time, and before becoming involved in his role today with Working Dogs for Conservation. Now, Corey, at your leisure, Corey's going to put in a link in the chat that will where you can read more. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So you can read more about Pete at your leisure. what you won't be able to read about Pete online, but you will find out in his talk today, is how passionate he is about Saola conservation. So when we, myself and Rob, were exploring options for partnering with a detection dog team many months ago, when we, it was my first time meeting Pete, and generally at the start of these calls, we would spend quite a bit of time trying to making it that watertight case as to why Saola conservation is so critical and why there's still time for Saola, and why we need to fight this fight. We didn't have to go there with Pete. He started the conversation by trying to convince us. So it was an obvious match. He's a true ambassador for Saola, and we're just so pleased to have him and his team on board. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Pete. And yeah, really looking forward to this talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorraine. Well, and I'm gonna kick it to Bill Robichaud, the president of the Saola Foundation, because I watched Bill give a presentation on Saola. It was probably almost 10 years ago, and at the time I said that would be such an amazing application for conservation detection dogs. And so I'm just giddy and thrilled that that we get to be part of this, and that the whole staff shares that enthusiasm. So thank you for reaching out to us, and for this opportunity to talk about it. I hope this is going to be the first of many times we all get to connect. And off we go here. I'll start just by sharing, mentioning our shared goal here, which is to find Saola, and to do that in a way that not only informs confirms that they're there, but informs the way forward in terms of protecting them, and protecting the incredibly important places that they live. And I need to be transparent about the fact that I'm the executive director. I'm office boy. I stay I stay here in Montana. I do get to visit the field sites sometimes, but the real driver behind this program is Amy Hurt. She's one of the founders of our organization. She's with us, and her title now is Director of Special Projects. Amy is one of the most experienced conservation dog trainers in the world, in my humble opinion. We throw lots of hard things her way, and I specifically chose these photographs because Amy's familiar with Asia, and yes, she does know about the leeches. That's the photo on the right. And so she will be she'll be leading the charge from our side, training the dogs, base training them, helping to train the handlers who are eventually selected, and backstopping them for the life of the project. And what I can say is you couldn't have a better a better trainer behind all of this. She's wonderful, just a great person, and a really experienced trainer, handler, conservationist. So I'm hopeful that maybe down the road, Amy will be able to do one of these for all of you in the future. And unfortunately, she couldn't join us today, so I apologize for that. But just a little bit of background on our organization. Working Dogs for Conservation we've been around for a long time, but we're kind of off here in Montana doing our own thing. So forgive me for spending a second telling you all this stuff. But the conservation dog world is growing. It's growing quickly. When I started, we had six active dogs, and now we're over 40. We're up to 16 full-time staff, and we've worked in a lot of places around the world. And we do a lot of different things, from one-off consultations to really capacity building and a long-term relationship like this program. And I'll just touch on the four sort of pillars of what we do, of ecological monitoring and law enforcement, biosecurity, and environmental justice. But even before that, let me give you a little bit of a background on the whole conservation dog world, because it is a kind of a niche in small, in the conservation industry, I guess you'd call it. So these are all difficult species, and I say that with a little bit of trepidation, because Saola is obviously the bar by which we're going to measure difficult species to work on. But in all of these cases, there are lots of people who will spend entire field seasons or even careers never seeing these species. And so that makes it very difficult for us as conservationists when people come to us and say, what do we need to do to save these species? Often we don't know what they're eating. We don't know what diseases they're getting. And in many cases, we don't even know where they are. So, as biologists, that often leads us to go to more intensive and more expensive kinds of options. And this is an example from my past. We were charged with figuring out where a pronghorn migration that had disappeared was where the pronghorn were wintering. Pronghorn are not rare. There are more pronghorn in Wyoming than there are people. But we had to put out 72 radio collars to track these animals to find out where they're wintering and what was their mortality and things like that. And we did that in 36 hours, and it cost us over $200,000. So it was really expensive. It can also be dangerous for wildlife. Capture operations for pronghorn in the past have lost as many as 20% of the animals they handle. We were very careful, and I'm not going to lie, we were lucky as well, and worked very hard at it. We didn't injure or lose an animal, but it can be dangerous for wildlife, and it can be dangerous for people. This is the same helicopter that we flew in. 3 weeks later, it was over in Idaho on a wolf capture operation, and they lost the tail rotor and crashed. Fortunately, no one died, but as you can see, they did not walk away. It was not a pretty sight. The pilot was an absolute hero, putting the helicopter down on its left side, on his side. But my point is that we clearly in the conservation world need better tools to do things like this, to find out about wildlife. What we need are things that are less, more safer for people, safer for wildlife, and less expensive, quite frankly. And oddly, that's a dog's nose. A dog's nose really is the best chemical sensor that the world has ever known. And that's not hyperbole by any means. Dogs have been demonstrated to detect odors at concentrations down to 1 part per trillion. It's absolutely extraordinary. And they're also really good at discrimination, telling the difference between two different things. And of course, they run all over the place. You can take them wherever you want to go. I can train them on a new scent in an afternoon, and they'll work for kibble and a ball. So they really are just exceptionally flexible and powerful tools for conservation. And so I should mention to all of you that how it works. So what we do is we take dogs out to the field and we have them search. They search for whatever targets we want. And because they're searching for odor, which travels through the air, dogs can find things from extraordinary distances, and really do amazing things. That's why they're used for search and rescue. That's why they're used for narcotics and bomb detection and all sorts of other applications. And our field is relatively similar. Watching a conservation dog work is pretty similar. So for most of the history of the organization, we've done what we call ecological monitoring. And a lot of people, you hear that term, it might sound like, counting animals and doing science, watching them through time and things like that. That is true. We do a lot of that, but sometimes it's just as basic as finding out if they're there and protecting, those places that they live and they exist. So, for about the first 10 or 15 years, our organization was in business. That's what we did. We worked on grizzly bears and carnivores, all sorts of different species, really all over the world. And I'll tell you about some of those. But as the organization has grown and as people have realized the power of dogs, we've applied them to other contexts. And preventing the spread of invasive species and diseases, that's why we call it biosecurity now, is another thing that dogs are really powerful and useful for. And if I had to guess, I would say over the next 10 years, this is probably going to be the area where conservation dogs grow the most and are increasingly used by other institutions and organizations and things like that all over the world. Many of you are aware of the crisis in wildlife trafficking. You know, a lot of people know about it from elephants and rhinos, but you know, there are literally hundreds of species of animals, plants that are trafficked all over the world. So we use dogs in a manner very similar to stopping narcotics or you know, guns and ammunition, you know, things like that all over the world. And we're now part of a network that we started of over 400 handlers and dog and handler teams in 15 countries and 32 U.S. states here. And so it's really wonderful to interact with all these folks and help them you know, run their dogs and do important things for conservation. And a slightly different pillar that we're involved with now is using all of those tools, in monitoring biosecurity and invasive species and crime, stopping wildlife crime, in service of environmental justice. So I don't have time to go into all those, but we're launching our first environmental justice, explicitly environmental justice project this year up in the Blackfeet Nation here in Montana with an organization called Indigenous Vision. We're really excited about it. So for those of you for whom it is evening and you may be having a beer, I apologize to throw some data at you. I promise there won't be much, but because you know, this is a scientific endeavor, I wanted to share just a little bit about this with you. That dogs are really good at the things we throw at them, at the things they do. You know, from being able to identify kit fox scats successfully and accurately, all the way up to finding species at much faster rates or with much less expensively than humans do, or using conventional methods. So I won't run through all of these, but you know, dogs really open the doors to lots of things that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And I promise this is the last data slide. It's a little bit busy, but PUE, that just means catch per unit effort. So that means, you know, the samples you get back or data points you get, and per unit of effort is you know, for what you put in. So a biologist day in the field is, you know, one unit of effort. 2 days, 2 biologists in the field, that's 2 days. And what we did is we reviewed all of the studies that we could find of different species that dogs have been deployed for. And we asked, you know, at what point do you get the most return on that investment back from using dogs? And it tends to be for cryptic species, species that are, you know, hard to find, that are hiding a lot of the time. You can see that eastern box turtle almost 40 times more. So, you know, dogs found eastern box turtles at 40 times faster than biologists searching for them using the conventional methods. So, you know, it's cryptic species, it's species that live at very low densities, and species that live in complex habitats. So I think that probably sounds familiar to many of you, and that's why this is a good fit, I think, for Saola, and part of the reason that I'm so thrilled to be getting involved with it. But I'm going to tell you now some of the challenges that are in front of us and that we need to overcome and doing part of this, because, you know, I was very excited to get involved with this, and then it very quickly becomes a cautionary tale of be careful what you wish for. But I should say I'm really confident that we can work through a lot of these things and successfully deploy dogs. So the first thing is just the basic training of the dogs. We need dogs can find anything we tell them to, and we have devised clever and you know, novel ways to do that, to tell dogs what we're after and what we're looking for. But that's hard to do with Saola in this case, because so few have been handled and have ever been observed and seen in the wild. So we're taking the belt and suspenders approach, and we're gonna use both historical samples. We're gonna use as training samples for the dogs so that they learn to find those. We're also going to use some really cutting edge laboratory techniques to synthesize odors as training odors. And then once the dogs are in the field, we're going to have to be really adaptive and train them to, once we do find verified Saola scat, then we use that to retrain, to update their training. And there's an old saying in dog training that, you know, dogs are either training or they're untraining, and they're never just finished. And that's the case, and that will be the case throughout the life of this program and projects. It will keep us on our toes, and we will need to be very adaptive, you know, as we move to different parts of the landscape and different circumstances. But you know, I'm really confident that we'll be able to do that well. The second challenge is dogs, finding dogs. We are a little different than other organizations in that we do not use specialty bred dogs. That's for a variety of reasons we can talk about later, but we rescue the dogs that we train. They're all either rescues or what we call career change dogs, which is really, you know, a lot of dogs from, say, Customs and Border Protection, or we've had military dogs who, you know, don't like to bite, who then come to us. And that's often the last, you know, washing out of those larger programs is often the last stop before the shelter. Working dogs are you know, notoriously difficult to keep as pets, and so they don't do well in shelters or with families. But the challenge of that is that we have to screen. We have to look far and wide to find these dogs. We screen about 1,000 dogs for every one that we take, and it's a rare individual that has the drive and the capability and what we call nerve strength in order to do this work. So we don't just find them out there on the beach, you know, but it is, we've established actually a nationwide and even farther international network of colleagues and friends and even online resources to help find the right dogs that can do the work. In this case, one of the challenges will be they need to be of a body size that, you know, they can work in remote places. I'll show you some examples of that, but also deal with heat. You know, the heat is going to be a challenge in this environment. And as many of you all know far better than I do, this is not going to be an easy landscape to work in. And I think that's a great reason to use dogs in the first place. But you know, to their mobility and their ability to cross some of these areas. I'll give you some examples about how we've dealt with that in the past. This is a beast called the Cross River gorilla, and that's not a super high quality photo because it was taken from a camera trap. There are no professional photographers who've seen this animal in the wild. It's the rarest great ape in the world. It lives in the mountains on the border between Nigeria and Cameroon. There are probably only around 250 that exist. And the reason they exist is because the reason they are in that area is because it's so remote. It's just incredibly difficult to get there. And so they haven't been subjected to the pressures that of surrounding forests in that area. We were asked with collaboration with WCS and the North Carolina Zoo to help census those animals. And so Lily got to go to that area. That's Lily there. As you can see, it's not easy getting up to some of these forest fragments, but she was able to get into every single one of those forest fragments and not just sample, but complete a census. I'll tell you a little more about that project in a little bit later on. But it was the dogs, you know, finding scat from the gorillas was not difficult. And that's one of the great powerful things about dogs is it's non-invasive. So all we need to do is find their scat or their dung. And so we can learn things about where these animals occur. And I'll tell you about some of the other things we can do from that too, without ever having to capture or harass or ever even see a lot of these species. So it really offers a powerful sort of tool that way. And here's another example. This one from Asia. That's Amy on the upper right there on elephant back. We were part of Asian elephant surveys in Myanmar, and as it turns out, that year the surveys were scheduled in advance, and all the logistics were in place, but it didn't stop raining when they thought it would. And so they had to go the last 30 kilometers into the protected area on elephant back. And you can see Wicket made the trip on elephant back with her. That's Wicket, who worked until close to after her 13th birthday. She lived to over 15. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us, but she was one of the most experienced conservation dogs in the world. She searched for over 30 different scents in her day. Dogs, the opening the door to these remote areas, and besides trekking, getting in a lot of places. I think we're well positioned for that. So that's a nice dimension there. So the last part of this is, okay, so we find scats. Now what? What do we do? Well, one of the things that we're constantly doing is always scanning new technologies, lab techniques. So that's Amy again. Amy was part of the Cross River Gorilla surveys. And you can see a gorilla scat on the ground next to the blue tube there. And these scats were collected and surveyed not only just for where they were and identifying the individuals in the DNA. Back in the day, we could just identify the species. Now it's possible to identify individuals. We can tell who those individuals are related to. We can look at stress hormones. We can look at reproductive hormones, dietary composition. So the sort of quip is that the value of dung just keeps going up and up, And these the other panels there are chosen specifically because we combine dogs with lots of other technologies, and I think these may be relevant in this context. The middle panel there with the gloved hand holding the dung pellet, that's from a moose. Moose have declined in a lot of the United States. We were part of a study that looked at them at their decline, and we were able to find information from over 1,200 moose. Those cells, those are epithelial cells being pulled off of the pellet there that give us DNA from each individual moose. But we also used a technique called microhistology to look at what the moose were eating and the parasite loads that they were encountering. So it became a powerful tool to tell us a whole bunch about what's happening, what's going on with moose. And I'll tell you that study cost about $40,000. Contrast that with the $200,000 pronghorn study I mentioned. The cost of a radio collar is about $3,500 to $4,000 GPS collars these days. So you can see we really do get a lot of bang for our buck with dogs. And I think once we do find Saola scat, dogs can also be useful in helping to understand what's going on with them and what we can do to protect them. So, as I said, we're thrilled to be part of the team, but dogs are just one part of the team, but an importantly integrated part. And I think the most important thing is that each of these, the dogs, the human trackers, the DNA analysis, these are all mutually reinforcing. Dogs will generate information to deploy the human trackers. Obviously, the DNA will be confirmation as soon as we do find things, and then all of that will get plowed back in to find more. So it's a really, I'm excited because of the design and how this is all going to play out with improving as we go, learning as we go, and working adaptively. I'll just in sort of wrapping up before taking a few questions here. Share with you just a couple other things that may not always be obvious about working with dogs is everybody loves a good dog story. And we've worked with tons of biologists who say, no one has ever come to see me in the field, from the press in the field. But, these dogs coming, it's novel. And TV crews love it, and press, print press and all of that stuff. And what we've realized is it really can be a very powerful tool for outreach, to let people know what's going on. Not only on, to build the partnerships that fund conservation work, and that will be necessary in this work, to let people know that this is happening, but also for outreach and the people that we're working with. So, our dogs get a lot of press. These press clippings, a lot of them were from boat inspections. making sure that zebra and quagga mussels aren't introduced into 8 national parks here in the West. Not the sexiest stuff, but it gets picked up and carried very widely. And when we're in the field, we really make a point to also, use the dogs as ambassadors for the local communities that live in the areas where we're working. And it's really a great opportunity to have conversations about not only just dogs, but conservation and what the projects are about and why we're there. So it's a dimension that often people don't anticipate, but it's a powerful one. Okay, so we also have to be ethical, and we're not going to put dogs out in the world and in harm's way in case, so we need to have a conversation. What if we don't find a Saola, or what if what if we find them and then the role of the dogs is that they're not needed after that. I can tell you that our dogs all have retirement packages. We did that before we were able to do it for our staff. Their whole retirements are taken care of. But often, in the course of a couple of years, repurposing the dogs maybe is also a possibility. As you all know, this part of the world is a global center of endemism, a hotspot. It's on virtually every global set of priorities, whether you're looking at the global 200 from WWF, hotspots from CI. It's an important part of the world. I mentioned Wicket. She was on 32 different odors at the end of her career. So if I don't want to have that conversation now, but if we do have to have that conversation at some point, we've decided it's time to stop looking for Saola. The dogs can be repurposed and look for other items. They can also be repatriated. We have done that in the case of bringing dogs back from Africa. The only time we had to do it was for a dog that had a brain tumor, actually. But that is an option as well. So ecological monitoring for a lot of different species. I'll just return back to this data slide, and I will show you. That is Bryn, a super dog from South Africa. He's not one of our dogs. He belongs to Vicky Hudson, who I saw on the list of participants. But right between Bryn and the GPS, that is a very tiny little geometric tortoise. It's one of the rarest tortoises in the world. I chose it specifically because of the Asian turtle tortoise crisis. Dogs find those. Not only are they good at finding individuals, but they're good at finding small and cryptic individuals that humans just can't find. So repurposing them in that part of the world, where there's lots and lots of other important stuff, is an option. And of course, returning to the enforcement and wildlife crime, issue. There could be a role if there are protected areas set up and the Lao government is operating and choosing, and there's no reason that an ecological dog can't be purposed for law enforcement and things like that. And we do lots of that stuff all over the world. So one other question that often comes up is, how are you guys funded? Where does this come from? Lorraine mentioned we have been incredibly lucky. That we have some individual donors who are supporting an individual donor who's supporting our side of this project, so we can offer our services free of charge, which is wonderful. And that really we're fabulously lucky because it's a partnership. There are 3 legs to the stool, and some people have to get out in the field and beat their head against the wall and slog through the forest and do those things. And I don't do those things anymore. And many of us can't do that, but we can write checks. And so that is just as an essential part of the team as the dog or the human trackers or the handlers or anything like that. So we're very fortunate that that's the case for us. We also do contract work for the federal government or NGOs. It's all conservation related, but we do that and have grants from foundations and government programs and stuff like that. So I hope I haven't confused you all or said anything like that, but I'm ready for some questions, and Lorraine can take the hard ones and I can take the softballs. We go. And should I stop sharing my screen now, Corey? Is that
No, you can probably keep that up, I think.
okay?
If
I will
anybody
leave that
wants
there.
to, because we can see you as well. So
Okay, perfect.
so yeah, I'll go ahead and start, I suppose, with the
Great.
Q&A. First question was from Helen Esmond. This was in the context of the first part of your talk. She was asking, which US states are the dogs used in?
Oh, well, our dogs, we're based here in Montana, and we've worked in about 32 states overall, on different projects all over. We also, the 32 states mentioned in the law enforcement context, those are through the Conservation Canine Officers Association, which Lauren Wendt, who leads our law enforcement programs, she founded it when she was a game warden, and then came to lead lead our law enforcement projects and works with us now. It's all over. I mean, and a number of so the West, the South, all over the place. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question from Jane Marr. How does the dog forget an earlier training sample?
We try not to have to do that. But at times we have had to do that in cases. So for example, Wicket was on 32 different scents in her lifetime. She never searched for all 32 of those in any one place, because those are spread all over the world. But when a dog is trained on, say moose, this happened to Wicket. Wicket was a moose dog in the Adirondacks, which are relatively rare and expanding from the north to the south now in the Adirondacks. But then when she came back to this part of the world, moose are much more common here. So what the handlers would do, rather than trying to extinguish that behavior, to alert to it, the handlers would just we call it a read and go. They look at the sample, they say good girl, and keep going. But she doesn't get her full toy reward. Normally when there's a sample found, they get a toy reward and they get a tug, and it's a huge party, and it's a big reward. And their toys, all of our dogs are toy motivated. And we use positive reinforcement. We're positive reinforcement committed in that regard. And so it's a big party when they find it. But the read and go, and they eventually figure it out. They just understand, oh, I guess that's not what we're here for, to work on. For some species, if we've got a dog that, say, has been trained on a non-target that we don't want them finding in a landscape where they're working, we'll deploy that dog elsewhere. Now that we've got 40 some dogs, we're able to pick and choose who goes where. So we have that problem less than we used to.
Cool, thanks. Next question from Darren. What preparation goes into ensuring the dogs themselves don't introduce potential alien or invasive species or diseases into a working area? Yep.
Obviously, it varies by each area, and so but we have to consult with all of the both local vets, but also U.S. vets. I often quip that sometimes it would be easier to invade some of these countries than to bring dogs in. Flying them on airplanes and things like that is complicated and difficult. But yeah, there's a long process of ensuring that they're well vaccinated and wormed and all of that stuff. And the other way around as well. These are very valuable individuals. We've invested a huge amount in them. We love them and adore them, but also, from a financial point of view. So we do a pretty comprehensive review of what the risks to the dog are, so that they're not, getting ill in the field and then bringing things back to the United States and things like that.
Okay. Next question from Sandra. What are the legal restrictions to get the dogs into all of the different countries?
Yeah, again, it varies. I mean, it honestly, it can be, it's all over the map. So it can be very difficult. And there are some places we don't work and we won't, it's very difficult to, bring dogs to Australia, for example. But there is a thriving conservation dog industry there. So, we hand things off to our partners. If someone comes to us and says, we want you to work there, we hand it off to them. It's alarmingly easy in some cases to bring things back to dogs back to the United States, because we have rabies and distemper and all of those things here. So again, we consult with USDA, APHIS before the dogs leave the country, before they come back, and then every host country has its own set of regulations that we do in advance before they go there. So, but they all know well in advance that they're coming. They've seen the health records. We work closely with, say, the government, just like we will in Laos, saying what are your requirements, what are the risks that can be there, and all of those things, and all of that's in place before the airplane lands with the dogs.
Okay, next one also from Sandra. Do the dogs work in established human dog teams, or do they have to work with different people?
In general, we have a dog with a primary handler. But now, as we do capacity building projects, and I imagine this is the way it will play out in Laos as well, we'll have a primary handler and backup handler. And that's so that the handlers can have home leave and take breaks and do all of that stuff too. Dogs will also get breaks. Dogs we have a duty cycle where dogs, they'll work 3 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off. That cycle tends to work very well for dogs. But it's a close relationship. And one of the things that a handler does is read the dog's body language. We look very closely at changes in their behavior. And so that works best when the dog and the handler really know each other well. And so that's why we tend to keep one, ideally it'd be one-on-one all the time, but people get sick and need breaks and things like that. So we often have one and a backup handler, but it's really important for them to know each other well. And this is hard work. This is not the same as narcotics, which, heroin always smells like heroin every single time. But wildlife odors can be, new and old and dry and, burnt by a fire or, decaying from mold and things like that. So a handler really does need to read a dog's behavior very closely and see what they're thinking. And that works best when they really know each other.
Okay, next couple questions from Olay.
Okay.
In the Annamites, there are leeches everywhere, mosquitoes, fleas, etc., which can be annoying and harmful for dogs. There's also extreme weather conditions in the wet forest. How do you deal with this, taking care of dogs while they're working in the forest? And then along the same lines, obviously the search for Saola is going to be hard work. How do you keep the dogs healthy, and how do you help exhausted dogs?
Yeah. The short answer to that is we're going to have to monitor them very closely and be adaptive. And if that means taking a break, we have to take a break at times and pull dogs out of the field. The veterinary medicine in the developing world is a challenge, and we take very we monitor the dog's health very closely. So all of our dogs in areas where there are tsetse flies, for example, they have their temperature taken twice a day. They're weighed every other day. And we look at blood slides and we treat for trypanosomiasis, prophylactically, and have gotten very good at catching it early. And that we'll have to do the same in Laos. It may, we're also going to make sure that the handlers are backstopped with video communications, so that we'll be able to communicate with them and diagnose things with the dogs, for example, if there's a skin, condition or things like that, but also resolve training issues. Like I said, dogs are either training or untraining, and it can be difficult if they're struggling, and not finding things, targets. So you have to keep them constantly training and reinforcing those behaviors. So we'll be in close contact through satellite communications.
Just let me know when you want to quit, but there are a few more questions. So next one.
I'll stay here as long as you guys want to. So that's fine.
Okay. Next one from Dow. How can you make sure that the dogs don't scare away the animals that they're supposed to be searching for? Do they know how to stay discreet, and how do they alert you if they see a Saola, for example, by barking or making some sort of sign?
Yeah. To be clear, we will not train. We do some live animal work where the dogs actually find a live animal, and for that kind of work, we select the dogs very carefully for dogs with very low prey drive, dogs that would not chase an individual animal. And probably the best example of that is the black-footed ferret. It's the rarest mammal in North America. There are scads of them relative to Saola. But we would never want a dog injuring a ferret, or even a dog getting injured by a ferret. And they sniff right down in the burrows. So those dogs are those are dogs that would not chase, and that they're an individual. And we can work dogs on or off lead. Or a long lead is like a check cord or a long lines, as they call it in other parts of the world. But in this case, for Saola, we're going to train on dung, scat. It's exceedingly unlikely that they will encounter one, and it will probably slink away into the forest before the people and the dog arrive. But our dogs have excellent recall, and they're absolutely not allowed to chase wildlife, and they work within our close view. In a tropical forest, that's hard to do sometimes. They're behind trees and things like that. But they're relatively tightly controlled. They're better behaved than most pet dogs.
Great, thanks. Next one from Sandra. Do the dogs normally stay behind in the countries that they work in?
Yes, normally most of the dogs that have been deployed overseas, in almost every case, when they retire with their handlers. It's a lot like the military. They develop a very close bond with their handlers, and that's mutual. The handlers almost always want them to retire with them. We support them for the rest of their lives with food and medical care and things like that, so that it's not a financial burden for those handlers. In some other cases, they, some of our Zambia dogs have gone to the other parts of the country and retired with one retired with an expatriate family who was living on the other side of the country. But we always find, and this is true of the dogs that fail in our programs too, we always find an appropriate forever home where they can handle a working dog. And we have repatriated, we have brought dogs home, but it's pretty rare, and usually not necessary, because they're very popular. Everybody loves them.
Cool. Just FYI, we're going to take about 2 more questions and then we're going to wrap it up. Bill's
Great.
got some closing comments. And for those of you who have outstanding questions, we have recorded them all, and Pete will certainly be reaching out by email or another means to answer them. So don't worry about that. Okay. Next question from Teresa. How many dogs do you anticipate mobilizing for the Saola project, and how long will it take to train each one of them for Saola detection?
Yeah, our vision is at least 2 dogs on the ground to start with, and then depending on how the program goes, and if and when Saola are found, possibly adding more after that. That's obviously something that'll be decided in close coordination with Saola Foundation and what's happening on the ground. The fastest that we've ever trained a dog was about 9 weeks from rescue at the shelter to deployment in the field. It usually takes about, and that was extreme circumstances. It was an extraordinary dog. It was Wicket, the dog you saw in the who worked in Myanmar and with Amy, a lot of places. But in general, it usually takes 2 to 4 months for them to learn how to be a detection dog. And then once they learn the game and they understand what's happening and how to do it, everything, you can introduce new odors in a day. The Saola dogs will only be working on Saola, and so that'll be their base training. That's what they're going to start with from the very beginning. So it'll be about that sort of time frame. But there, like I said, there's always maintenance training that goes on for their whole careers after that.
Okay, and I guess we'll call this the last one for now.
Okay.
What is the average number of years that a trained dog can operate?
That's a great question. Our dogs tend to have longer working lives than most, military, police, other working dogs, and that's because we have a diversity of projects that we're able to put them on. So, for example, Lily there in the slide. She's now retired. She's 13, but she worked until last year, until well after her 12th birthday, because we were able to put her on projects where it's flat ground or discrimination. We do a lot of what's called discrimination projects that are telling the difference between two very similar odors. And old experienced dogs are really good at that stuff. They're good at problem solving. They understand the game, so we're able to keep them working and take advantage of that experience, later on in life. So I mentioned, Lily worked till 12. Wicket worked till after her 13th birthday. We had another dog, Pepin, who worked right up until at 12 as well. But a lot of military dogs will be retired at 8, and a lot, police sometimes they'll go to 10, but it's relatively uncommon.
All right, thanks very much. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to unspotlight Pete and
I'll stop
Bill.
my share.
Bill, if you can unmute yourself.
Well, God, that was fantastic. I assume you can hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pete. One thing I take encouragement from, to date, the main method to search for Saola has been camera traps with mixed success over the years. And I think your stat is tremendously encouraging that dogs are 9 times more likely than camera traps to find one bear or bobcat, if I recall correctly. This is going to be exciting to put them on the case of finding Saola. Still, as you noted, finding Saola is still going to be quite a challenge. But that challenge is part of what makes it fun for us in the Saola Foundation and also worthwhile. And also, to be clear, there's now no technical barrier, no technical gap to finding Saola and thus saving it. It's now only a resource gap to find the resources to put the methods we have, like the dogs, into the field. And as Lorraine noted, we're working rapidly to close this gap, and we're really close. We were delighted to offer today's program for free, but if you would like to thank Pete for his excellent talk with a goodwill donation to help get these dogs in the field as soon as possible, Corey will put a link in the chat, or you can just go to the Saola Foundation's website. Thank you very much. One last word about 2 more webinars we have coming up before summer pulls all of us in the Northern Hemisphere, at least outdoors. Our next program will be on Indigenous Peoples of the Annamite Mountains by anthropologist James Chamberlain. On Saturday, March 19th, Jim will speak to us live from Laos, where he has worked for nearly or more than 50 years. And imagine this, of all the villagers and local people that live in the Saola's range in Laos, not one of them speak Lao as their first language. They're a huge complex of different ethnic groups, some of them endemic to the Annamite Mountains like Saola. In fact, Jim has characterized the Annamite Mountains as a region of cultural and linguistic megadiversity. And this is quite important to us because most of what we've learned about Saola since it was discovered is from talking to local people. So we'll send out information on Jim's talk. It's going to be fascinating. I've known and worked for Jim for a long time. While I and some of my colleagues have discovered new species in the Annamites, Jim has discovered several new languages and ethnic groups there, which we'll talk about. And then in April, our new research associate, Minh Nguyen, this passionate young Vietnamese conservationist, will talk to us about her research and her passion for large antlered muntjac. Large antlered muntjac is another endemic mammal that was discovered in the Annamites soon after Saola. It's also endangered, and also little is known about it. And Ming has set her goal on learning more about large antlered muntjac and how to save it as well. And she'll talk to us about that in April. So thank you all very much for joining us, and especially Pete, thank you so much for your time, and that was absolutely fantastic. And Corey, thanks for a great job in running the program. And again, mainly thanks to all of you for your support and for showing up today. All right, have a good rest of your weekend, everyone.
Okay, thanks everyone. Stopping the recording now.